Immigrant, also known as an alien, foreigner, or migrant, is a term used to describe outsiders coming from a different country who might not have the right to. As a human rights issue, immigration is sometimes seen as a negative thing, causing terrorism towards immigrants and unlawful rights. Immigration in the United States has caused the lives of immigrants to be threatened. According to ACLU, federal immigration enforcement policies, including border enforcement measures by Customs and Border Protection, have led to an increase in racial profiling, border killings, and denial of due process rights. Due to the mistreatment of immigrants, their lives have been at risk while crossing the border. Immigrants are treated unequally and have suffered through denial and pain. They have not been treated properly in the case that they should be free in dignity and with rights. That is stated in Article 1. On the other side of the border, the threat of deportation is replaced by new dangers like homelessness and violence. After immigrants are deported out of the United States, they are forced to live in an environment that cannot sustain them. Most of them are moved to places where there is no opportunity for them to survive without help. The number of immigrants entering the U.S. was down last year, but the American authorities know that many of those deported will return. And once they are deported, they are homeless and rely on handouts at soup kitchens. Most of them miss the life that they had, but they had no choice but to live with the circumstances. Some are undocumented on the U.S. side, and when they are deported, they continue being undocumented. Their lives are at risk because they are in a very unsafe environment. Many also become addicted to drugs because they are not in a place where it's healthy to live. Some immigrants believe their best way to survive is to live under bridges. Some say it reminds them of what they left behind in the U.S., and they believe it's their last resort until they try to cross the border again. A professor from Yale School of Management says the economic benefits of immigration. Is immigration good or bad for the economy? Here's how many people think about immigration. A migrant worker comes in and takes away the job of a native worker. There are a lot of mistakes with that, according to the economists who studied migration. First, the story would be that simple only if an immigrant substitutes for a native worker perfectly. In reality, migrants often take jobs natives don't want, and immigrants are more likely to move into sectors or language skills and customer or client-facing skills are not as important. In other words, natives with such skills are not easily displaced. In the case of agriculture, for instance, migrant workers literally keep fruits from rotting on the ground. Different people are deported out of the U.S. and they have no choice but to try to live the life that they had in the U.S. The Central American migrant caravans are groups of people who fled gang violence from the northern triangle of Central America during Holy Week in early 2017 and 2018. The caravans traveled from Honduras to Guatemala to the Mexican border to the United States border. That is nearly 1,000 miles long. Troops were sent to try to deter two caravans of Central Americans who say they hope to reach the U.S. to escape violence, find work, and reunify with family. Their numbers were expected to shrink since they were still 1,000 miles from the border. But the overall movement of Central Americans is a threat. Since most immigrants are undocumented, they try to reach the U.S. by crossing Rio Grande, which is a river that divides Mexico and the U.S. Thousands of immigrants from Central America are currently traveling en route to the United States, most of those making the journey by foot, and many are from the city of San Pedro Sula in Honduras, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world. Those attempting to cross were being met with the resistance. Both Mexico and Guatemala sent hundreds of Guatemalan officers to their mutual border to try to prevent the immigrants from reaching the U.S. President Trump seems to think the politics of the economy aren't as powerful as the politics of fear, even if he says it's not politics, as he refers to migrants crossing a bridge 1,800 miles south of the U.S. border. Today, immigrants make up 13.5% of the U.S. population. This is close to the historic high of 1890, during which 14.8% of the population was foreign-born. Only about 47% of immigrants become citizens in the United States. That might seem like a fair number, but when the number of immigrants who are denied the right to become citizens is contributed into the percentage, the number decreases. About 3,000 migrants from the Central American caravan had reached Mexico's border, and thousands more were on the way, trying to bring order out of chaos as hundreds of migrants lined up outside the port of entry. They waited to see who will be called next to cross the border. Many believed their lives were in danger if they went back to Guatemala. The migrants were quickly discovering that they may not be welcomed in either the U.S. or Mexico. To reduce tensions, hundreds of migrants were taken on buses to a sports complex. The city officials soon turned it into a shelter. Mexican officials admitted that they were worried about violence along the border, even as more migrants arrived, carrying with them almost nothing but hope. President Trump had threatened to cut aid to the Central American nations they came from, and many were fleeing violence and crisis in their home countries. Over 7,000 kept making their way north, fleeing poverty, persecution, and violence in home countries. In April of 2018, 1,500 reached the U.S. border. 250 applied for a visa, and only 3 so far have received it. They were battling 100-degree heat and exhaustion. The caravan was rumbling forward no matter what. New video inside the country's largest immigration processing facility was released. 1,100 men, women, and young children are crammed in to make what looks like cages. Small bodies wrapped in plastic heating blankets, sleeping side by side behind metal fencing. Since more illegal immigrants are rushing through the border, more kids are being separated from their parents. On Dover Air Force Base, American soldiers head to their latest deployment. This is an airlift squadron that last year deployed Afghanistan. This mission is closer to home. Help secure the southern U.S. border. 5,200 soldiers will fan out across southern states and deliver planes and helicopters with night sensors that can find people crossing the border illegally and quickly deploy Border Patrol agents. Use combat engineers to lay fencing along the border and provide housing for Border Patrol agents and add security to border checkpoints. So in conclusion, immigration in the United States has been a vast human rights issue.